The will reading was supposed to be a formality. I was just the nurse who had cared for Theodore Spears in his final months, invited out of courtesy to hear how he'd distributed his vast fortune among his estranged family. When the lawyer announced that everything had been left to his niece, Elizabeth Harris, I started to gather my things to leave. My name was Madison, after all, and I was not his niece. Then the lawyer looked directly at me and asked, "Miss Harris, what is your full legal name?" That's when my world changed forever. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Now, let's go back to the day I first met the man who would change my life. Theodore Spears was not an easy patient. At 78, he was wealthy, demanding, and had a reputation for driving away nurses faster than most people changed their sheets. When the private nursing agency called me about the assignment, they were upfront about the challenges. "He's been through 6 nurses in the past 4 months," my supervisor, Janet, explained over the phone. "The family is desperate. They're offering double the usual rate, but I have to warn you, he's difficult." Difficult how? Demanding, critical, refuses to follow medical orders. The last nurse said he threw a water glass at her when she tried to give him his medication. I should have said no. I was already working full-time at the hospital and barely had time for my own life, let alone a challenging private patient. But something about the desperation in Janet's voice and the mention of double pay made me reconsider. "I'll take it," I said, "but I want to meet him first, see if we're a good fit." The Spears mansion was exactly what you'd expect from old money: imposing, elegant, and slightly intimidating. The housekeeper, a stern woman named Mrs. Clark, led me through rooms filled with antique furniture and oil paintings that probably cost more than I made in a year. "She's in his study," she said, her voice carrying a warning. "He's having a bad day." I found Theodore Spears sitting in a leather wheelchair by a massive window overlooking manicured gardens. He was a small man, made smaller by illness, but his eyes were sharp. When he saw me, his expression immediately hardened. "Another one," he said dismissively. "How long do you think you'll last?" "The record is 3 weeks." "It depends," I said, pulling up a chair to sit at his eye level. "How long do you think you'll need a nurse?" He studied me with surprise. Most people, I imagined, either cowered before his wealth and reputation or tried to placate him with false tearfulness. I was doing neither. "The doctors say I have maybe 6 months. Pancreatic cancer. Nothing they can do except manage the pain and wait for the inevitable." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "That must be frightening." "Frightening?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Young lady, I've lived 78 years, built a business empire, and accumulated more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of dying alone, forgotten, with nothing to show for my life except a bank account." There was something in his voice, a loneliness so profound that it made my chest ache. "What about your family?" "What family?" His voice turned bitter. "I have a collection of distant relatives who haven't spoken to me in years, except to ask for money. They're circling like vultures now, waiting for me to die so they can fight over my estate." "That sounds lonely." "It is." He looked at me with those sharp eyes. "So, Miss Harris, Madison Harris. Miss Harris, are you here to steal from me, placate me, or actually help me?" "I'm here to take care of you," I said simply. "Whatever that looks like." Something in my tone must have convinced him, because his expression softened slightly. "We'll see," he said. "We'll see." Over the next few weeks, I learned that Theodore's reputation for being difficult was largely a defense mechanism. He'd been disappointed by so many people. Employees who stole from him, relatives who only called when they needed money, friends who disappeared when his health declined, that he'd built walls around himself. But underneath the gruff exterior was a man who was intelligent, well-read, and surprisingly funny when he let his guard down. He'd grown up poor during the Great Depression, built his fortune through hard work and smart investments, and had never married or had children. "I was too focused on business," he told me one afternoon as I helped him with his physical therapy exercises. "Always thought there would be time for a family later, but later never came." "Do you regret it?" "Every day," he said quietly. "Money can buy you a lot of things, Miss Harris, but it can't buy you people who genuinely care about you." As the weeks passed, our relationship evolved from professional to something approaching friendship. I would arrive each morning to find him waiting in the study with a book he wanted to discuss or a story he wanted to tell. He was fascinated by my life, my work at the hospital, my small apartment, my simple pleasures. "You seem happy," he observed one day, "despite not having much money." "I have enough, and I have work that matters. People who care about me. That's more than a lot of wealthy people can say." "Indeed," he said thoughtfully. Theodore began asking me about my family, my background, my dreams for the future. I told him about growing up with my single mother, about putting myself through nursing school, about my hope to someday open a free clinic in an underserved community. "Your mother raised you alone?" "Yes. My father left when I was very young. Mom never talked about him much, just said he wasn't ready to be a parent." "And your mother's family?" "She didn't have much family. My grandfather died when I was in high school, and I never got to meet my grandmother. Mom always said we were good enough on our own. She's been gone for 2 years now, had suffered with respiratory disease." Theodore seemed particularly interested in the details, asking follow-up questions about my mother's maiden name, where she'd grown up, when she'd moved to our city. I assumed he was just making conversation, trying to understand the life of someone so different from himself. As his condition worsened, Theodore became more reflective, more concerned with his legacy. He spoke often about a niece he'd lost touch with decades ago. "Elizabeth was my sister's daughter. My sister Willow died young, and Elizabeth was raised by her father. They moved away when she was a teenager, and we lost contact. I've always wondered what happened to her." "Have you tried to find her?" "I've harried investigators over the years, but the trail went cold. Elizabeth would be in her 50s now, probably married with a different name. She could be anywhere. Why is finding her so important to you?" Theodore was quiet for a long moment. "Because she's the only real family I have left, and because I want to leave my fortune to someone who will use it wisely, someone who understands the value of helping others." "What about your other relatives?" "Vultures," he said dismissively. "They see my money as their birthright, but they've never shown an ounce of genuine care for me as a person. If I leave my fortune to them, they'll squander it on luxury cars and expensive vacations. I want my money to do some good in the world." In his final weeks, Theodore's health declined rapidly. The pain medication made him drowsy and confused, but he still insisted on our daily conversations. He seemed to be working on something important, making phone calls and meeting with his lawyer, but he was secretive about the details. "I'm making arrangements," was all he would say when I asked, "making sure everything is taken care of." One afternoon, about a week before he died, Theodore asked me to sit with him in the garden. It was a beautiful spring day, and he seemed more alert than he'd been in weeks. "Madison," he said, using my first name for the first time, "I want you to know that these past few months have been the happiest I've had in years." "Mr. Spears?" "Theodore," he corrected, "and I mean it. You've shown me more genuine kindness than I've received from my own family in decades. You've reminded me that there are still good people in the world." "I've been good to you too," I said. "You've taught me so much about history, about literature, about seeing the world from a different perspective."
"I want you to promise me something," he said, taking my hand with his frail fingers. "Whatever happens after I'm gone, whatever you learn about yourself, remember that kindness is the most valuable currency in the world. Don't let anything change who you are." "I promise," I said, though I didn't understand why he was being so cryptic. Theodore passed away 3 days later, with me holding his hand. His final words were, "Thank you for seeing me as more than just a rich old man." The funeral was a small affair, attended mostly by business associates and distant relatives who looked more interested in the reading of the will than in mourning Theodore's passing. I sat in the back, feeling like an intruder among people who had known him far longer than I had. After the service, Theodore's lawyer, a distinguished man named Charles Hill, approached me. "Miss Harris, I'd like you to attend the reading of Mr. Spears' will tomorrow afternoon. He specifically requested your presence." "I'm just his nurse. I don't think I belong there." "Mr. Spears was very clear about wanting you there. His staff is requested," Mr. Hill said firmly. 2:00 tomorrow at my office." The next day, I found myself in an elegant conference room surrounded by Theodore's relatives, cousins, nephews, and nieces I'd never met but who had suddenly appeared when they learned of his death. Some other members of his staff were there: Mrs. Clark, the housekeeper, Mr. Allen, the driver, and Mrs. Linetti, the cook. Mr. Hill cleared his throat and began reading from a thick document. "I, Theodore James Spears, being of sound mind and body, do hereby make this my last will and testament." He read through a series of small bequests, money to charities, gifts to long-time employees, as Mrs. Clark, Mr. Allen, Mrs. Linetti, and Mr. Hill himself. Modest sums to various relatives. The family members shifted restlessly, waiting for the main event. "And now, regarding the bulk of my estate, valued at approximately $12 million, the room fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "I leave my entire remaining fortune, including all properties, investments, and liquid assets, to my beloved niece, Elizabeth Harris." The room erupted. Theodore's relatives began shouting, demanding explanations, threatening legal action. But I barely heard them. I was staring at Mr. Hill in confusion. My name was not between the employees that were rewarded some money and gifts. Why was I there? I realized some misunderstanding had happened. My place was not there between the shoutings of Theodore's relatives. I'd be better if I leave the room quietly. As I was heading to the door, Mr. Hill raised his voice above the chaos. "Ms. Harris, I was referring to you." "I think there's been a mistake," I said, not understanding what he meant. "I was not mentioned in the staff part of the will." "Yes, because the final part was directed to you, Miss Harris." "What do you mean?" "My name is Madison, not Elizabeth." Mr. Hill held up his hand for silence. "Ms. Harris, may I ask what your full legal name is?" "Madison Elizabeth Harris," I said automatically. "But I've never gone by Elizabeth. I've always been Madison." "And your mother's maiden name?" "Elizabeth Jones," I said, still not understanding what his point was. "Your grandmother's, Miss Harris." "Willow," I said, abruptly, then stopped, the implications hitting me like a physical blow. "Willow Spears?" The room fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence, the silence of a mystery being solved. Mr. Hill smiled. "Miss Harris, you are indeed Theodore Spears' niece. Your grandmother, Willow Spears, was his younger sister." "That's impossible," I whispered. "My mother never mentioned that. She said her family was all gone." "Your grandmother and Theodore had a falling out when she was very young. She disapproved of his business practices, thought he was too focused on money and not enough on family. She moved away. Theodore spent years trying to find you all. I felt like the world was spinning around me. But how did he know? How did he know I was his niece? He's been searching for decades, but when he saw your picture through the nurse agency, he had the gut feeling. You are a photocopy of your grandmother, Miss Harris. Am I? I've never seen a picture of her. Mr. Hill handed me an old photo of a young woman with light eyes and dark hair. The resemblance was really scary. It looked like a photo of me in 70s clothes. The DNA test results came back some weeks ago. DNA test? I was completely lost now. The water glass you used during your first week of employment, Mr. Hill had it tested. Mr. Hill's expression was kind but serious. You are indeed Theodore's biological niece, Miss Harris. But more importantly, you passed his test. What test? Theodore found another woman named Elizabeth with possible connections to his family. He spent months observing you both, testing your character, your motivations, your capacity for genuine kindness. There was another Elizabeth? Elizabeth Carver, a woman who claimed to be his niece and had been pressuring him for money for years. She visited him several times during your employment, though you probably never saw her. She was demanding, clearly interested in his wealth. I thought back to the days when Theodore had seemed particularly tired or upset, days when he'd mentioned having difficult visitors. You, on the other hand, showed him genuine care and compassion. You treated him as a person, not as a bank account. You earned his love and respect through your actions, not your claims. One of Theodore's cousins, a red-faced man named Robert, stood up angrily. This is ridiculous. She's just a nurse who manipulated a sick old man. We'll contest this will.
You're welcome to try, Mr. Hill said calmly. But I should mention that Theodore anticipated this reaction. He left detailed documentation of his decision-making process, including video recordings of his interactions with both Elizabeth candidates. The contrast is quite stark. He turned back to me. Miss Harris, your uncle left you a letter. Would you like me to read it now, or would you prefer to read it privately? Now, please, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Hill opened a sealed envelope and began to read. My dearest Elizabeth, and yes, I know you prefer Madison, but I didn't have the chance to reconnect with your mother, and that makes me really sad. I'm feeling anticipated proud for you. You have proven yourself to be the remarkable woman I always hoped you would become. I know this inheritance comes as a shock. I know you probably have questions about why your mother never told you about me, why our family lost touch, why I never tried harder to find you sooner. The truth is, your grandmother and I were both stubborn, proud people who let a disagreement about money and values drive us apart. She thought I was cold and greedy. I thought she was naive and impractical. We were both wrong, and we were both right. But watching you these past months, seeing the woman you've become, I know that Willow raised you with the values that matter most. You have her kindness, her strength, her ability to see the good in people. You also have something I never had, the wisdom to know that money is just a tool, not a goal. I'm leaving you my fortune not only because you're my blood relative, but because you've shown me what family really means. You cared for me when I was difficult and demanding. You listened to my stories when you could have been doing a dozen other things. You treated me with dignity and respect when others saw no more than a difficult old man with money. Use this inheritance wisely, Madison. I know you will. I've seen your heart, your dreams of opening a free clinic, your desire to help people who can't help themselves. This money is my way of making sure those dreams become reality. But more than the money, I hope I've given you something else. The knowledge that you were loved, that you mattered to someone, that your kindness and compassion made an old man's final months meaningful. You are my legacy now, not because of our shared blood, but because of your beautiful heart. Make me proud. With all my love, your Uncle Theodore. P.S.
There's one more thing. In my study, behind the Shakespeare collection, you'll find a photo album. It contains pictures of your mother as a child, of our family before everything went wrong. I saved them for you, hoping that someday I'd have the chance to share them. Now, you can know the family you never knew you had. By the time Mr. Hill finished reading, I was crying openly. The hostile relatives had fallen silent, perhaps finally understanding that this wasn't about manipulation or greed. It was about love, family, and the power of genuine human connection. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Mr. Hill said kindly, "but you do have some decisions to make. This inheritance comes with significant responsibilities." Over the next few hours, Mr. Hill explained the details of Theodore's estate. In addition to the $12 million, I had inherited his mansion, his art collection, and several investment properties. It was overwhelming, almost incomprehensible. "What am I supposed to do with all this?" I asked. "Whatever you think your uncle would have wanted. But I suspect you already know."
He was right. Even as I sat in that conference room, surrounded by more wealth than I'd ever imagined, I knew exactly what Theodore would have wanted me to do. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of the Theodore Spears Community Health Center, watching as families from the underserved neighborhood streamed through the doors for free medical care. The mansion had been converted into a state-of-the-art clinic, with the finest equipment and a staff of dedicated healthcare professionals. The art collection had been donated to local museums, with the proceeds funding a scholarship program for nursing students from low-income families. The investment properties had been converted into affordable housing for seniors and families in need. I kept enough money to live comfortably and to ensure the clinic's long-term sustainability, but the vast majority of Theodore's fortune was now working to help people who needed it most. Mrs. Clark, Theodore's former housekeeper, had stayed on to help manage the clinic's operations. "Mr. Spears would be so proud," she told me one afternoon as we watched a young mother leave with her healthy baby after a free checkup. "I hope so," I said. "I'm still learning how to be worthy of his trust." "You already are," she said firmly. "You were worthy the day you chose to see him as a person instead of a paycheck." That evening, I sat in what had once been Theodore's study, now converted into my office at the clinic. On my desk was the photo album he'd mentioned in his letter. Pictures of my mother as a laughing child, my grandmother Willow pregnant, and Theodore as a young man. Of a family that had been torn apart by pride and misunderstanding. There was one photo that particularly moved me, my grandmother and Theodore as teenagers, their arms around each other, both grinning at the camera. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, were the words, "Willie and Teddy, best friends forever." Now, sitting in the quiet of the evening clinic, I understood what Theodore had meant about legacy. It wasn't about the money or the property or even the good works the foundation would accomplish. It was about the connections we make, the love we share, the way we choose to see and treat each other. I'd started as Madison Harris, a nurse who thought she was alone in the world, except for her mother. I discovered I was Elizabeth Harris, heir to a fortune and a family history I'd never known existed. But most importantly, I'd learned that family isn't just about blood or names or inheritance. Family is about the people who see you, really see you, and choose to love you anyway. Theodore had seen past my simple life and modest means to the person I really was. And in return, I'd seen past his wealth and reputation to the lonely, loving man underneath. The inheritance had changed my circumstances, but it hadn't changed who I was. I was still the same person who believed in helping others, who found joy in simple pleasures, who measured wealth in relationships rather than bank accounts. But now I had the means to make a real difference, to honor the memory of a man who taught me that the greatest legacy isn't what you leave behind,
It's what you inspire others to become. As I locked up the clinic that night, I thought about Theodore's final words to me. Thank you for seeing me as more than just a rich old man. But the truth was, he'd given me far more than I'd given him. He'd given me a family, a purpose, and the resources to make my dreams reality. Most importantly, he'd taught me that sometimes the most important discoveries aren't about finding treasure. They're about finding yourself and learning that you were worthy of love all along.
An absolutely beautiful story about hidden family connections, the power of genuine kindness, and how sometimes our greatest inheritances aren't what we expect. Have you ever discovered something surprising about your own family history? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story of Madison Elizabeth and her unexpected inheritance touched your heart and reminded you that family is about love, not just blood, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories about the connections that change our lives. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.